Hello YouTube and welcome to an all-new Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we'll be talking about what could have quite possibly been the last ever attempted colonies of the Ayleids, the city of Sunder. Now this specific city is interesting because the Ayleids attempted to found it in the very last years of their existence, before their, as far as we know, full extinction. So let's talk about the city and what made it fall in the end. So, the Ayleids, they were elves that lived in the central parts of Tamriel, occupying most of Cyrodiil, parts of Blackmarsh and parts of Valenwood, with even some smaller colonies across the rest of the continent. These elves, at one point during the First Era, had a massive empire comprised of many different Ayleid kingdoms, spanning almost the entirety of Cyrodiil and the areas in the bordering provinces. They were a proud people, and their massive empire functioned largely on slavery at the end of their empire, as the Ayleids tended to enslave humans and other races for their labor. Now, this system functioned pretty well for them, that is, until the human slaves, and presumably the other enslaved races as well, started a massive rebellion under Slave Queen Alessia. This rebellion led to a civil war within the Ayleid Empire, as when the slave rebellion took success after success, even some Ayleid kingdoms allied themselves with the rebellion against their brethren. This was supposedly due to a religious conflict over whether Ayleid should be worshipping Daedra or Aedra, but that's a topic for its own video. What is important to know, however, is that the humans won, and Ayleid power was no longer dominant in Cyrodiil, with the First Cyrodiilic Empire, the Alessian Empire, now taking a hold of the province under the former slave queen Alessia. Then, almost a century after the rebellion, the Ayleid kingdoms, which sided with the rebellion, were also abolished and largely hunted down when an anti-elf extremist faction called the Alessian Order took control over the empire. In this period, many Ayleids which still remained in Cyrodiil fled from Cyrodiil to the still existing Ayleid kingdoms in the northern parts of Valenwood, western parts of Blackmarsh, or they ended up fleeing to the Somerset Isles or High Rock, where large elvish populations of other races welcomed them into their society, and they eventually just disappeared in their society, interbreeding. This is what we call the late Ayleid period, and their population declined slowly in this period, between the first few centuries of the First Era towards the start of the Second Era. The last major Ayleid kingdom supposedly fell in the year 482 of the First Era, but Ayleid cities and smaller enclaves and colonies continued to exist in the coming centuries. We know, for example, that during the Riemann Empire, which existed in the late First Era and partly in the early Second Era, Ayleids were once again welcomed in Cyrodiil, although there were precious few of them left at that point. We know, for example, that the Ayleid Charan Fear lived and worked within the Cyrodiilic University of Gwylim from the year 2790 of the First Era until the year 227 of the Second Era, and actually wrote academic books on his people, and he said that they were still living in small enclaves across Valenwood and Blackmarsh, although these enclaves, for all we knew, were very small and according to him operated in a tribal way. But it's important to realize that this guy lived and wrote this more than 2000 years after the fall of the last major Ayleid kingdom, meaning that the actual extinction of the Ayleids happened much more slowly than people generally assume, and that it was more of a steady population decline happening over centuries since the fall of their empire. Which brings us to the city of Sunder, one of the final Ayleid attempts at settlement. We know from Charan Fear and his writings that by this time many of the Ayleids who were left more than 2000 years after the fall of their final kingdom in recorded history lived in what resembled basically tribes, which is what likely led to their later nickname of the Wild Elves, which is what they're called in some of the Elder Scrolls games. One of these tribes, or a faction which split from those tribes, set off to build a new city for themselves in the year 291 of the Second Era, at a point where their society was basically nothing more than a few tribes, most likely. Considering we don't really see any living Ayleids in the Elder Scrolls Online, only 300 years or so later after the attempted founding of Sunder, it's very possible that this might have actually been the last surviving tribe, but the jury's still out on that one, as we don't really know how many tribes in other parts came to an end. Anyway, deep in the jungle of Valenwood, they wanted to build a new city for themselves, which would be functioning as a new base for them and most likely also as a trading hub with the local wood elves. But only a year or so after the foundation of this new city, which they had called Sunder, it disappeared entirely along with all of its inhabitants. In the coming centuries, scholars would search for the lost city of Sunder but would not find it anywhere, or the scholars searching for it would disappear. It had disappeared simply into the vast jungle of Valenwood, and none would find out what happened to the city. That is, until a group of scholars found it and discovered the city's quite tragic story. You see, when the Ayleid tribe arrived at the site in Valenwood where Sunder would be built, they found that the jungle was quite impenetrable. They weren't able to found the city there in any easy manner. When they attempted to build anything, the jungle was in their way, as if the jungle itself resisted being built in. Now, normally something like this would lead to a different site being chosen for the city, but not for the Ayleids, as this tribe, late in the existence of the Ayleids, still knew some of the powerful magic of their ancestors, and they managed to deduce that the jungle around them was actually controlled by gentle but firm jungle spirits. And using the magic of their ancestors, they found a way to bind these spirits together in a welkin stone. And they then forced these jungle spirits to work for them, enslaving them to their will and using their power to aid in the construction of their new city. This actually worked really well. Using the enslaved spirits, their builders were able to dig deep among the roots of the jungle and start building deep chambers for their city, which at this point was also being partly built above ground as far as we know. They brought the welkin stone with the bound spirits to the deepest parts of their new city, where it could be most easily used to control the earth and the roots of the plants around them. But the welkin stone was then far away from the sunlight that the spirits actually craved and fed upon. Construction of the new city went really well, but after a few months of construction, suddenly the builders and their conjurers started mysteriously disappearing, vanishing without a trace one by one. And after a few months, only a handful of them were left, and progress on building the new city slowed to a crawl. The people that they sent to look for their lost brethren also disappeared, and eventually only one conjurer was left, who a few days after writing his last journal entry also went missing. Now, nobody ever heard of the tribe anymore, and any trace of the city soon vanished from the face of Tamriel. The city was gone, never to be found again. That is, until some Altmer scholars around the time of the Elder Scrolls Online unearthed the ruins and found the remains of several other expeditions which had found the ruins, but hadn't made it out to tell the tale of the ruins. In the Elder Scrolls Online, you as the player can help the final member of this expedition uncover what truly happened to the city of Sunder by delving into the ruins. And as you delve in, you discover that the gentle forest spirits which the Ayleids had bound to their will far away from sunlight had been driven mad by their imprisonment far away from the sun and within artificial walls that they really couldn't stand. They went mad with hunger and sneakily took control of parts of the city on their own and started devouring the builders and conjurers' flesh to sate themselves. And when there were no longer any Ayleid builders or conjurers left to devour, these spirits were freed from their will, but they were still locked inside the stone and they were still locked inside the city. The spirits then had the earth that they could still control around the city swallow the city so that none would ever be able to find the city. And they then went to sleep as they had no energy left without either sunlight to feed on or flesh to consume. Each time a scholarly expedition found them and ventured inside the city that they now fully controlled, they awoke the spirits and they were consumed by the spirits, after which the mad spirits once again went back to sleep. You as the player are the first one to be strong enough to resist the dangers of the city and prevent the spirits from killing you with their vines and their animals under their control. Instead, you free the spirits, after which their sanity returns and they can once again feed upon the sunlight and they can once again merge with the jungle and the other spirits. This actually marks the end of the story of the city, as we finally know what happened to its inhabitants and the city's remains are finally safe for scholars to explore now that the spirit is no longer controlling them. That said, that was the story of the lost Ayleid city of Sunder. But before I end this video, there's one more thing. In the intro to this quest, where the quest giver gives you the quest, she actually says that the city was found by the Altmer, and that it's a long lost city that was an early Altmer expedition. I don't know if she meant Altmer with a T or Altmer with a D, because the Altmer with a D are actually the ancestors of all the elvish races. She just said our people, which could mean both. That it was also a lost city, which was an early expedition. So it could also mean that she meant a different city, or this is just a really weird lore contradiction that Elder Scrolls Online has multiple of. But I don't know, maybe she was searching for another city and found the Ayleid city, because all the other notes on this city all speak of the Ayleid. So, you know, I just wanted to have mentioned this. Anyway, that's all that I can say, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that I'll see you again in the next Elder Scrolls lore video, most likely next week. And allow me to thank my top Patreon supporters, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Polarized Poutine, Athena Hyodis, Andrew Jordan, Doji, Fenrir, Sort of Bushido, Sarmikal, and Mr. Christmas. It's thanks to these people and all the others on screen that this channel stays alive, and for that I'm very grateful. That said, I will see you all in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.